Hello, Nova Church.
Hello.
Nova is beginning a church-wide conversation and Bible study about women's roles. Now, this is happening after several years of study, prayer, discussions. There have been task forces throughout our family of churches, and each congregation is at some stage of processing the outcome and recommendations of all this work. And so that is why we're here to kick off what is happening in Nova. Today, we want to introduce the topic and explain what we mean by Bible and gender, and we will lay out a plan of study and discussion as a congregation.
Right now for this video, we're going to do it sort of like an imaginary Q&A. We're going to ask some questions that we've heard asked and answer them for you. And in this way, we hope we can share the most important things that you need to know as we begin this conversation as a church. And I just want to acknowledge up front that there are a lot of fears about this topic. And it is really important that we take the time to have this conversation in the best way possible so that there is open dialogue, the Bible is open as well, and that we really love each other through this process.
All right, what do we mean by Bible and gender, or Bible and women, or women's role in general?
Yes, a lot of times you might hear people say this is about women's roles, but it's really hard to talk about women's roles in the church without also talking about men's roles, especially since a lot of the scriptures that are used are also referring to marriage, husband and wife. So it's really a discussion about the scope of both men's and women's roles among disciples of Jesus at our meetings, in our leadership roles, and even in our homes. So it's really about the interdependence of men and women as we serve together in ministry. For example, some of the focus has been on, in a mixed audience of both men and women, what can a woman say and do really in terms of speaking or even singing, for example, in a worship setting on a Sunday? And what about leadership roles? What can a woman do? Those are some of the questions that we will be discussing. So the next question is, what's at stake specifically? What exactly are we deciding, and who is deciding?
Well, we're really deciding two overarching things. Number one is, what does the Bible say about this? And number two, what will our church practices be? Why this topic is unique is there's a range of interpretations and applications, meaning there's a diversity of thought about what we understand the Bible to teach about women's roles, the role of women, how gender roles, and what it looks like in practice. This is a process of continual learning, and this is not the final decision for all time. This is something that we'll review and revisit probably several times in our lifetime. Some more information when we think about what's at stake is to discuss the scope of men and women's roles, is the role in marriage, the role in worship services, as Tamara stated earlier, and our role in gatherings, our role in leadership, and all of these are important. These four things can be divided into two related spheres: home, household, and church community. For Nova right now, we're going to discuss primarily on the church community, even though it is hard to separate the two in this discussion.
So the next question is, who decides?
Well, that's a very, very good question. Well, Acts 15 really gives us a great model of decision-making with controversial topics in the church. When you read the particular account in Acts chapter 15, there was a big issue between Jews and Gentiles. And what we see in this model is there was much discussion on a larger scale with a larger group, and then the leaders determined what the best course of action were. We want to try as best as possible to imitate this. We know that we won't do it perfectly, but there's lots of good spiritual principles that we can glean from that can inform how we go forward in our process. We'd like to imitate this through workshops. We're going to have some with the house church leaders, followed by deliberation with the Nova leadership team. Believe it or not, we have not decided anything yet. but we are going to sort of take it all in and figure out what is going to be the best course of action for us after study and discussion. So some may be asking the next question, which is, well, why now? Why are we talking about this now?
Well, there are a lot of things that are converging all at once. So this is my opinion. First of all, just in the past few years, our family of churches have come to realize that there are definite generational and even regional, in terms of geography, differences in thinking about this topic, the Bible and women, women's roles, men's roles, and so on. So then there's some challenges from our culture. For example, why is the church operating differently? Things that have been assumed as normal practice are now being questioned in a new way, although this has happened before in history. The other thing that is happening is that there's been an acknowledgement of some hurts that have come out from our practices as a church family. Various things from various places, really. I'm not just focusing on Nova, but just from all over our family of churches, including the burnout among women leaders. If you're not married, or you don't, for example, you don't have a husband in the church, just feeling overlooked. I've heard of jokes that have put women down, even in preaching. There's also an overemphasis on male examples in preaching. That has been something that has been talked about. And not consistently preaching examples of faithful women in the Bible, and so on and so forth. Maybe you have some examples yourself of some things that have just not been best. So all of this contributes to an overall tone in some of our church cultures that the perspectives and needs of women are overlooked. And in some cases, there's the perception by women that we are less than men. And so, in my opinion, those are some of the things that are all coming to bear at this time that we're having this conversation about the Bible and women and women's roles.
Yeah, in response to these things, and there's been a swell of interest and debate in this topic, our ICOC elders team asked the ICOC teachers team to research this topic, and the teachers team co-authored the Bible and Gender paper that was published in 2020. Then the ACR family of churches established a gender task force in the spring of 2021. Brett Kreider and Matt and Katie Fisk were on this task force representing Nova. And the ACR task force gave perspective and Q&A at a leadership staff retreat in the fall of 2021. So Nova is not the only church that is doing this, if you were wondering this. Nova is entering a conversation that has already been happening, and we're not doing it in a vacuum. This has been happening throughout our family of sister churches in North America. And many of the churches in our ACR family have already started these studies and discussions this year. The Nova's leadership team began having this conversation last fall of 2021. And what we learned from these conversations is that I had a lot more questions than answers for sure. And many people on the leadership team and even on the staff, as we began to dig into it, had a lot of good questions. We were also realizing that we were operating from different types of study and information, that some people read this book or some people read this paper, but not everybody had the same information. And so what we're trying to do is operate from common ground. And so let's study and discuss the topic as a church, and then the leadership team will carefully consider the study and the discussions in deciding what our local church practice should be.
Yes, and just a final thing in the timeline that we think is relevant. At the end of last year, December 31st, 2021, the same ICOC elders team that had asked the teachers to do the Bible and Gender book and the paper, they sent a letter with an appeal to our regional families, our families of churches, in the spirit of Acts 15. And this letter gave a summary of 4 convictions that many of the church leaders and elders in our church family agree on, leaving room for some variety of practice at the local congregational level, like for Nova. And so we will discuss that as well.
So next question is so what will we do here in Nova? That's the burning question, right?
All right, so here is an overview of our process in Nova that we would like to to have with you for you to participate in. So first of all, the first part is to engage each one of us. We invite you to study this for yourself, this topic, like baptism or marriage or any other important topic. It's important to form your own convictions based on your own Bible study, your own discussion with others, and reading of other resources that help us to understand the Bible. We will give a list of core passages that are often studied. So read these, read the entire chapter that those passages, those verses are in. Then read the entire book that those verses are in. We learn the meaning of a passage by what comes before and after it. For deeper study, please also refer to the teacher's book or paper, The Bible and Gender, that addresses these passages in a lot of detail. And that book can be purchased through IPI or Illumination Publishers. And if you are having trouble getting that book, you can contact your region leader. We're also providing videos. This is the first of 3 for you to watch in preparation for further discussion. And there'll be about 20 minutes, not too long, and these will be leading up to greater discussion, such as in a workshop.
All right, so after engaging you, we're going to engage together. We will have an opportunity to attend a workshop with teaching and discussion on the topic. The house church leaders will meet first, and followed by that one, we're going to invite the entire congregation to one that will come later. And so we may use the men and women's midweeks for further discussion. But then after that, in our personal Bible study and together with these workshops, we'll pray and we'll consider what the Bible teaches about the scope of women's roles in our church community for when we gather together. Then we'll from those discussions, we'll study together, and Nova's leadership team will take time to pray and decide the scope of our own church practices. Now, remember that the ICOC elders have put forth convictions for the ICOC churches also, and this will be another resource for decision making.
One of the questions that sometimes comes up is, have the church leaders already, those in Nova, have the church leaders in Nova already made up their minds? And will the discussions make a difference?
Emphatically, no. We actually began to discuss this, as I mentioned, last fall. And what we realized is there were more questions than answers, and we certainly weren't in a position to be able to make a decision, nor would it be what we wanted to do. And so ultimately we will make a decision. But again, there's a range of possible practices. And so our discussion will help us determine what range is best suited for our particular church community. Another question you may have is how to prepare for the upcoming workshop.
Please watch the videos, this one and 2 more. Please also read the key passages, as we've already discussed, that you'll receive. And again, for deeper study, the ICOC Teacher's Bible and Gender book. What to expect? There will be 3 main segments of the workshop. And the first one is history of the topic, Bible and women and women's roles and men's roles. Second, heart, the heart to have as we study and discuss this topic. And then finally, hermeneutics. And that's how the particular lens we use to interpret the scripture leads us sometimes to different conclusions. So just want to say in closing, thank you in advance for your prayers, your study, and your feedback. It will be a great time of discovery, listening, and learning. And we look forward to being on this journey with you.
Okay, so before we go, here's some details about the first workshop. It's for the house church leaders, and it will be Saturday, May 21st. From 10 a.m. we'll begin, and it will end by 2 p.m. And it's going to be at the Episcopal Church of the Epiphany in the room called The Gathering Space. The address is 3301 Hidden Meadow Drive in Herndon, Virginia. So we look forward to engaging all of you at that time. Thanks for the time, guys, and let's keep praying and see what God does with this important topic.